Hello and welcome to my practicum presentation. So I am Emily and I currently teach middle school choir in the Kettle Moraine School District. I've been in my current position for 5 years now. This is my 5th year, and before that I taught elementary music in the district as well. I currently hold a Bachelor's of Music and Music Education from UW-Stevens Point. I have teaching licenses in choral and general music education. Through Wisconsin Lutheran College, of course, I'm working towards the High Performance Instruction Master's degree and also the Director of Instruction Administrative license as well. I have also completed the Adult Learning and Instructional Coaching graduate certificates through my program and in addition to my program at Wisconsin Lutheran College as well. So the introduction to the practicum. My practicum is titled From Standards to Competency-Based Learning. So I focus the majority of my time in research and information on transitioning from standards-based learning to competency-based learning in the classroom. And it ties in beautifully to the work that I'm doing in my actual classroom, in my choir room, because we are transitioning to competency-based learning. And so I've been able to really directly apply my learning and tie it into the work that I'm doing in my classroom. And I think that's created a much more meaningful process for me as I went through this course. Through the course, I developed 3 general course outcomes that I wanted to accomplish. So I wanted to develop an annotated bibliography of 35 sources on competency-based learning, and I did that and beyond. I went a little above the 35 sources. I wanted to research those sources and network with at least one person in and one person outside of my home district, and I went above and beyond that as well. I did my practicum with 2 outside districts as well as worked with some people in my district as well. And then the third one was I wanted to develop a toolkit of resources on the transition to competency-based learning to be shared with a professional network of colleagues. And that was the project piece of this practicum experience, was developing that toolkit of resources. And I've been able to really dig into some best practice strategies for that. And it's been very meaningful in the work that I'm actually doing in my classroom. Additionally, I also personally wanted to learn about what it's like to be a director of instruction, and I also wanted to find some networking contacts in administration as well, and that was kind of my own personal goals out of personal curiosity because I am getting the license, and I think that through the licensure tasks, it was a great opportunity to learn about what it means to be a director of instruction. So part 2 with the 100 hours in review. So I spent about 35 hours on the licensure tasks, and the licensure tasks were for the Director of Instruction license. I was able to do a lot of work outside of my district. In fact, I did it all outside of my district and kind of tied it in and compared and contrast within my district. So I spent about 35 of the 100 hours on those pieces, including the writing up and the readings and attending meetings and observing and interviewing and all of those pieces. I spent about 40 hours on the research. So the research tied directly into the project. So the 40 and the 25 are kind of estimates. Because my research tied so well into the project and tied well into what I want to do in the future research I need to do in the next 2 courses, I kind of went really hard into the research and spent a lot of time on that. So that included finding articles, reading articles, creating the annotated bibliography. I went a little above and beyond the 35 sources. And then it kind of rolled itself into the 25 hours that I spent on the project and beyond. So that 25 hours kind of includes the development of that toolkit, which was my project. And then it also goes into the time I spent on discussion posts and the videos and the pieces that we had to do for class, the writing reflections, the writing journal article reviews, things like that. So that played into the 25 hours for the project and the course pieces that I had to do. So as for the licensure tasks, I worked with Dana and Adam. So at Elmbrook Schools, I worked with Dana, and I did a lot of interviewing and a lot of conversations with her. The most meaningful thing that I got out of that was a music team meeting that I was able to observe. And this music team meeting was a curriculum meeting that Dana, who is the assistant superintendent, and she's the director of teaching and learning at Elbrook, she was running the meeting with the district's music team. And that was meaningful for me in a couple ways. It was meaningful for me as a music teacher, but it was also meaningful for me as somebody who could view that from a director of instruction lens. And it was really interesting to see Dana, as the director of instruction, who's not familiar with music, talk through music curriculum pieces with music teachers. And to see both sides of that was a really meaningful piece. The other piece of the practicum tasks that I did, the licensure tasks, was with West Dallas, West Milwaukee, where I did a lot of interviewing with Adam. He recommended looking at some school board meetings because a huge piece of the director of instruction role is interacting with the school board and presenting information at the school board on getting curriculum approved, getting budget approved, all of those pieces. And so there I looked into a lot of school board meetings, and that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of other school board meetings in other districts and how differently they're run, and some interesting pieces there. And so that was one of the most meaningful pieces that I spent some time on as far as the licensure tasks went. For the research piece, which was about 40 hours, my overarching research ideas was how to implement competency-based learning in a large group setting, because I do have class sizes well over 30 kids, sometimes up to 60, or my band colleagues have up to 80. And I wanted to research how to develop competencies within that large group setting. And then also what impact competency-based learning has on student motivation. So that was an interesting piece. I focused a little less on the second one. I focused most of my research on the first one because I wanted to get a good base of understanding of how to implement competencies before I did research on what competencies did. So I researched articles focused on the transition from standards-based to competency-based learning, and I found a lot of really interesting themes within that research. So the most interesting things that I found was the need to have independent learners and build independent skills with your students before you implement competencies. They need to have some responsibility and some deadlines and some boundaries and some scaffolding before they can be successful in driving their own learning, and they need to know how to do that. And each student will be unique in doing that as well. I also discovered that there's a huge shift in thinking for teachers and parents, and a lot less of a shift for students. Students are really easy, especially younger students, to convince to try new things. And teachers and parents really struggle with competency-based learning because it's so drastically different from the way that they learned. And they have this vision of what's happening in schools, and it doesn't match up with what's currently going on, and they struggle with that. Even as a music teacher, music education has transformed over even the last 10 years, and I have parents who currently sit in my room and say, "You mean you do assessments in music? We just kind of did concerts." And it's like, no, they actually do learn how to read music. They do assess, and they do, all those different pieces. And so even that's a struggle, but then to bring another layer of adding that into everything else is difficult for parents and teachers as well. The third most interesting theme that I found is that there was a similar strategy for how to go about this amongst most of the articles, almost all of the articles. They all had very similar ways that they took standards and made them into competencies and threaded them throughout the curriculum of their program. And that I found to be really interesting, and it was kind of reaffirming that, like, wow, all these different places and all these different peoples and all these different fields all found the same results. And that was kind of reaffirming in my research. That led me beautifully into my project and beyond, which was the coursework and the project for the course. So the project, the actual product that I produced, was a transition toolkit from standards to competency-based learning, which is a presentation to be presented at a professional development session. I really had to pare down what I wanted to put in there. I initially started putting some notes into an outline and ended up with over 20 pages of notes, and I had to pare it down to what's already 18 slides or something like that. So that was kind of a difficult piece to narrow that down. But I think it proved that I had a lot of good research and a lot of good information that I really wanted to share. the key aspects of that toolkit is how to build those independent learners, how to develop a plan and to develop the resources that you need, how to have a tracking system and how important tracking the competencies is, and then looking at exemplars. I had some really excellent exemplars, mostly in higher education. One of them included the University of Wisconsin Flex option, which is a competency-based degree program in Wisconsin, which I found really, really fascinating to spend some time digging in. That leads me to part 3, which is challenges and successes. So the biggest challenge for me was time management. I struggled with the workload. 100 hours in what essentially was 8 weeks, which was more like 7 once we kind of got started, was a very aggressive workload. And that was a huge struggle for me. I was not anticipating that. And there are a lot of pieces that I looked back and went, I really wish I had known about this so I could have done it sooner. Or I really wish I had, understood and grasped what this was going to be like so I could have mentally prepared myself. That also led me to some practicum anxiety. I really struggle with talking to new people initially, even though I'm a teacher and do it all the time. I really struggled with week 1, find a place to do your practicum and get the form signed in a week. And that caused me some huge anxiety and panic because I didn't have any context. I didn't even know where to start. And luckily, that led me to my successes. The successes, kind of working backwards from the slide, is that people really do want to help. And so I reached out to the teachers and to my colleagues and to other people and said, hey, who do you know? And that really led me to 2 fantastic people in Dana and Adam who really, really wanted to help me. They gave me everything I wanted and more to help me because they've gone through it and they understood. And that was really, really huge. The other successes that I found was that I really narrowed down my research project for the next 2 courses. And I think I connected my learning really well. I think doing the licensure tasks out of district in 2 different districts put a different spin on everything. And connecting the project to the research that I'm doing made it a much more meaningful process. And it felt like I was doing something that helped me organize my research in a really nice way. And that was a huge success for me. As far as learning about myself, check-ins are huge for me. I am not great at not having deadlines. And so even having every other week you had to meet and every other week you had to turn in a reflection with the number of hours, that was just the right amount of accountability for me, that I got the work done and knew I was going to have to do it. But I think if I didn't have that, I would have let some stuff slip away. And that was really huge. Having support in my fellow classmates, in my colleagues, and having support in my family as well was really huge. If I needed to lock myself away for 4 hours, my family helped make that happen to get some work done. If I needed to leave early from work to go to a practicum observation or a meeting, my administrative team made that happen. And that was really huge for me. And it reaffirmed the idea that people do care. As far as Wisconsin Lutheran College goals, I think the ones that I met in particular was I met personal goals. I applied my analytic skills through collaborative inquiry, research, and shared reflection on personal experience. That came through in the collaborating with colleagues and new people and networking and developing the research and sharing that out. I also engaged in data-driven strategies to promote high-performing academic programs. The data that I found in my research, I'm applying into my classroom, even though it's not technically part of this project. I'm still doing it, and that I think is definitely meeting one of those goals. And I also promoted a learning community that engaged in reflective practice and action research. And so building my own community that's working through these things together, I think was how I met those goals. So as far as the future goes, I definitely want to utilize the research in my classroom, even outside of the scope of my program at Wisconsin Lutheran College and outside of the scope of this course. I do want to utilize that research in my classroom as I switch to competency-based learning. And I also want to dive more into what it means to be a director of instruction and design curriculum and what that looks like. And I think diving into that and having that network base that started here is going to be huge and impact me greatly in the future. So that about sums up my practicum presentation. So I thank you for taking the time to listen all the way through to the end, and wish everyone the best of luck. Thank you.